May 13th, 1943, Tunisia. Private Marco Rossi surrendered to American forces near Bizerte. The Italian 136th Armoured Division had crumbled, supply lines severed, tanks abandoned. Marco, 23, from a Neapolitan village where roads were already neglected, faced an unknown future. Fascist propaganda had painted Americans as weak, but the Americans processing him moved with an efficiency and abundance that contradicted these claims. The journey to America was a series of bewildering observations. A Liberty ship carried over 2,000 Italian POWs, yet rations exceeded anything Marco's unit had seen for months. White bread, canned meat, coffee. Guards were indifferent, treating the crossing as routine. One even offered Marco extra chocolate, a symbol of unimaginable abundance for him. He kept the wrapper, tangible proof of this new reality. Landing at Norfolk, Virginia, Marco expected devastation. Instead, bustling docks hummed with seamless commercial and military activity. Cranes operated with precision, warehouses stood intact and seemingly limitless. Prisoners boarded westbound trains, and Marco pressed against the window, searching for signs of war he knew must exist. The train rolled through Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, and what he saw shattered his understanding of wartime. The roads were the first undeniable shock. In Italy, Allied bombing had turned ancient highways into obstacle courses of craters and rubble. Resources went to the front, civilian infrastructure waited. This was the calculus of war. Yet here, alongside the train tracks, stretched smooth asphalt and concrete highways, showing no signs of wartime neglect. Centre lines gleamed fresh. Surfaces appeared recently maintained. Every road Marco glimpsed displayed this impossible upkeep. Corporal Antonio Bianchi, a former Roman construction worker, sat beside him, silently pointing at road crews working in the afternoon sun. They operated grading equipment, spreading fresh asphalt, maintaining infrastructure as if no global conflict consumed resources thousands of miles away. Antonio shook his head, unable to reconcile this with the total war effort America must be waging. Other prisoners voiced similar confusion, searching for explanations. July 1943, Camp Alva, Oklahoma. The train stopped, and army trucks transported the prisoners to their internment facility. Marco expected a hastily built improvised camp. Instead, Camp Alva was a purpose-built complex spanning over 320 acres, hundreds of barracks in precise rows, guard towers, fresh-painted administrative buildings, water towers, mess halls, recreation areas. America had constructed a small city specifically for Axis prisoners, a testament to industrial capacity operating at full strength. Processing took hours. American clerks thoroughly recorded information. Medical officers, with professional detachment, noted malnutrition and injuries before administering treatment. Marco received dental work for a broken molar, a luxury civilians in Italy could only dream of. Here, in a prison camp, Americans devoted resources to enemy POW dental health. Marco and Antonio were assigned to Compound 3, housing Italian enlisted men. Their wooden barracks, though basic, offered real beds with mattresses, coal stoves, electric lighting and screened windows. The floors were swept clean. To Marco's genuine shock, the latrines featured flush toilets and a functioning sewage system, infrastructure exceeding civilian standards in many Italian villages. He had expected squalor, not this. The first evening meal at Camp Alva completed Marco's disorientation. The mess hall served over 1,000 prisoners in organized shifts. His metal tray held portions exceeding Italian army combat rations: meat, potatoes, vegetables, bread, milk. He sat staring at his tray, knowing his family in Naples subsisted on black market scraps and rationed grain. His sister's last letter had described constant hunger. Yet here, an enemy prisoner, Marco faced more food than he could comfortably eat. He forced himself to consume it all, but the cognitive dissonance caused physical nausea. The camp's daily routine established itself. Morning roll call, work assignments for volunteers, recreation, evening count. Discipline was maintained through structure, not brutality. Guards rarely showed hostility. Rules were posted in Italian and English. Prisoners who caused no trouble received treatment mandated by Geneva Conventions, far beyond Marco's expectations. The camp even had a library with Italian books, a canteen for purchases with scrip, and areas for sports. Marco's first work assignment 6 days later involved maintaining irrigation systems on a farm 20 miles away. Riding in an army truck through northwestern Oklahoma's rural landscape, he confronted the undeniable evidence. Even minor country roads serving isolated farms showed maintenance defying wartime logic. Gravel surfaces were graded, culverts functioned, bridge approaches were smooth. Marco, bouncing in the truck bed, saw road after road meticulously maintained despite America's massive military mobilization. Antonio, equally stunned, sat beside him. These weren't strategic highways, but civilian infrastructure supporting agriculture, far from any combat zone. Yet someone had decided they mattered. During lunch, Marco asked the interpreter, a young corporal fluent in Italian, how America maintained its roads during total war. The corporal, confused by the question, explained it was necessary for commerce, for transporting goods, for civilian life. He mentioned highway departments, state budgets, and federal programs that continued operating. Marco struggled. Italy had immediately subordinated civilian needs to military necessity. The idea that America could fight a two-ocean war while maintaining peacetime infrastructure seemed economically impossible. That evening, outside their Camp Alva barracks, Marco and Antonio watched the sunset. Other prisoners discussed the same observations. Everyone had noticed the roads, the abundance contradicting propaganda of American weakness. Some rationalized it as a facade, a show. But Marco had seen too much. The roads were too extensive, the maintenance too consistent, the infrastructure too deeply embedded to be mere theatre. This was reality. America possessed industrial capacity so vast it could simultaneously wage global war and maintain civilian standards exceeding peacetime conditions in Axis nations. The implications terrified Marco more than any battle. If America could afford to maintain roads while fighting three major powers, what else could it produce? Weapons, ships, aircraft, supplies. His unit in North Africa had surrendered due to material impossibility, starved of ammunition, fuel and food. Yet their enemy maintained smooth highways thousands of miles from any battlefield. This disparity suggested an industrial mismatch so enormous that Italy's defeat was a foregone conclusion. Letters home, under censorship, allowed Marco to describe adequate food, medical care and shelter. He subtly mentioned the maintained infrastructure, asking his sister if Italian roads had improved, knowing they hadn't. He knew that if his letter reached Naples, the roads there would be worse, bombing more intensive, deprivation more complete. Marco, an enemy prisoner in Oklahoma, was eating better than his free family in Italy. He couldn't believe it, but disbelief crumbled under accumulated evidence. The roads were real. The abundance was real. America's casual efficiency in war and civilian life was real. If these observations were true, everything else he'd been taught about this enemy was false. Lying in his bunk, he felt the propaganda edifice collapse. America's maintained roads, smooth and endless across a continent at war, taught him more about national power than any military briefing. Tomorrow would bring another work detail, another journey past those impossible highways, another day confronting the truth. Italy had lost not just battles, but the fundamental contest of industrial civilizations. The roads proved it. Italian POW Marco and 6 others arrive at a farm near Camp Alva at 7 a.m. The farmer, Mr. Henderson, offers them real coffee with sugar and cream, a luxury Marco calculates would exceed an Italian family's weekly food budget before the war. He and Antonio savour the unexpected abundance. Their work involves harvesting winter wheat with a mechanical combine harvester. Unlike Marco's familiar hand harvesting in Tuscany, which required 20 men for a week per field, this American machine, operated by Henderson's 18-year-old son, completes the same task in an afternoon. Marco's job is to stack 40-kilogram bags of grain onto a flatbed truck. By mid-morning, they've stacked 200 bags. Henderson's son provides ice-cold Coca-Cola, a sweet carbonated drink that shocks Marco with its unfamiliar taste. Antonio, accustomed to it, finishes his bottle quickly, and they are offered refills. At noon, Mrs. Henderson brings lunch: fried chicken, potato salad, fresh bread with butter, sliced tomatoes, and apple pie. She serves the prisoners first, piling their plates with generous portions. Marco notes the 2 pieces of chicken, the rich potato salad made with real mayonnaise, the soft white bread with thick yellow butter, stark contrasts to the rationing his mother endured in Italy. He struggles to comprehend such bounty, enough food for 10 people, far more than his own family saw in a month during 1942. Antonio quickly devours his meal, accepting a third piece of chicken from Mrs. Henderson. The apple pie, served with fresh cream, evokes an overwhelming sweetness Marco hasn't tasted since before the war. A second slice is offered without him asking. After lunch, Henderson takes Marco and 2 other prisoners to town for machine parts. The truck radio plays cheerful big band jazz. The town, with a population of 3,000, seems untouched by war. Stores are open and well stocked. A theatre advertises Casablanca. Civilians use gasoline freely for errands. Henderson parks at a hardware store, which Marco finds unbelievably stocked with tools, paint and farming equipment. The proprietor greets Henderson warmly, confirming parts availability without rationing cards or waiting lists. Marco, though limited in English, marvels at the precision-made tools, so different from the irreplaceable inherited tools of Italy. The proprietor offers him a peppermint hard candy, which Marco accepts. Next, at a filling station, a young attendant pumps gasoline into Henderson's truck without demanding ration coupons. Henderson pays 25 cents a gallon. Marco, aware that gasoline has been unavailable to Italian civilians since 1941, finds this casual availability astounding. The attendant even offers to check the tyres but accepts a nickel tip and wishes them a good afternoon. The entire transaction, lasting 4 minutes, highlights a normalcy that clashes violently with Marco's wartime experience. Back at Camp Alva, Marco and Antonio join other Italian POWs in the recreation hall provided by the camp. Reverend Crawford, a local Baptist minister, teaches English classes. Marco diligently copies vocabulary words like farm, field, and harvest into a free notebook, a stark contrast to Italian schools where paper was scarce. Reverend Crawford gently corrects Marco's pronunciation of harvest. After the lesson, he distributes donuts, their sweetness a further testament to the unimaginable abundance. Marco writes a letter to his mother in Arezzo using camp-provided stationery. Cautious of censors, he avoids directly describing the American bounty. Instead, he writes, "The Americans treat us well. We have enough to eat. I am healthy. The work is not difficult." He struggles to convey the reality of the coffee, Coca-Cola, chicken, pie, gasoline, full stores, and casual generosity without risking disbelief or being seen as succumbing to propaganda. His mother faces starvation and bombardment in Italy. He concludes, "I think of you every day. I hope you are safe. I pray the war ends soon," seals the letter, and places it in the outgoing mail. Antonio, writing his own letter, asks Marco, "What do we tell them? How do we explain this?" Marco replies, "We don't. They wouldn't understand. We didn't understand." Antonio acknowledges the pervasive propaganda of Mussolini, the lies about America's weakness. Marco clarifies, "Not lies. Mussolini believed it. We all believed it. But we were wrong. Completely wrong." Antonio then recounts seeing 3 tractors at the Henderson farm, one broken and unused because the others suffice. In his Italian village, one tractor served 12 families and was treated like a sacred relic. Marco has witnessed similar contradictions daily. New work clothes and boots are issued monthly by the camp. When his sole cracked, Marco received new boots within an hour, while Italian soldiers patched theirs with cardboard. Giuseppe, a former blackshirt, interjects, claiming this comfort food kindness is psychological warfare to make them compliant and turn them against Italy. Marco and Antonio have heard this before. Marco suggests, perhaps this is simply how they live. Perhaps this abundance is normal for them. Giuseppe scoffs, calling it theatre. Antonio counters that Mrs. Henderson's lunch was spontaneous, not staged, simply what she always brings. Giuseppe walks away, unable to reconcile his fascist worldview with their observations. Marco understands. He himself struggled for weeks with the cognitive dissonance. Everything he had been told, America's weakness, its incompetent military, its impending collapse, now proved catastrophically false. In the recreation hall, Glenn Miller's music plays. Corporal Davis brings magazines. Life, Look, the Saturday Evening Post. Marco picks up a Life magazine from November 1943, its cover showing American soldiers in Italy. Inside are photos of American factories, women on assembly lines, children collecting scrap, and families celebrating Thanksgiving. The full-page advertisements for cars, refrigerators, and vacuum cleaners shock him. America expects to win, resume normal production, and for its citizens to buy luxuries. Italy had promised sacrifice. America promises prosperity. Antonio, looking at a Norman Rockwell illustration of a Thanksgiving dinner, suggests it's propaganda. Marco replies, or maybe documentation. He acknowledges it might be idealized but reflects the Henderson family's casual generosity. This national confidence, the expectation of normalcy and continuation, transcends mere propaganda. A nation truly threatened wouldn't maintain roads, provide ice cream to prisoners, or advertise post-war refrigerators. That night, Marco realizes the immense cost of maintaining 800 POWs at Camp Alva. Meals, medical care, clothing, recreation, wages. Multiply this by hundreds of similar camps, and it represents an expenditure that would bankrupt most nations. Yet, America manages it as a minor administrative function, feeding prisoners better than many American civilians during the Depression, or most Europeans before the war. This ease highlights America's vast capacity. His village couldn't feed 800 extra people for a week. America feeds hundreds of thousands indefinitely, while simultaneously supplying its military, aiding allies, and maintaining civilian abundance at home. Antonio asks, "What happens when the war ends?" Marco replies, "Sec, we go home." Antonio counters, "To what? Destroyed cities, bombed factories, no food, no work, occupation." Marco has no answer, knowing Antonio is right about Italy's inevitable, devastating defeat. Antonio then reveals the Hendersons asked him to stay and work their farm after the war. Mr. Henderson's only son plans to go to college. Antonio is torn. His family is in rubble-strewn Naples, his brother's dead, his father missing. Returning means ruins and ghosts. Staying feels like betrayal. Marco understands Antonio's impossible choice. Loyalty to a homeland that betrayed him versus a new life, in a country that cared for him more as a prisoner than Italy did as a soldier. The choice should be simple, but it isn't when home is ash and the enemy offers chicken, pie, and a future. May 8, 1945, Camp Alva, Oklahoma. The announcement of Germany's surrender crackled over the loudspeaker. Private Marco Rossi, an Italian POW captured 2 years prior in Tunisia, stood among 300 fellow prisoners. While American guards celebrated, the Italians remained subdued. Their homeland had been liberated months earlier, and their own surrender dated back to September 1943. For them, this moment signified the war's conclusion, but also the arduous return to a devastated Italy they barely recognized. Camp officials announced repatriation would begin within 6 weeks, prioritizing those with documented families. Marco, whose wife Lucia and 2 young sons had survived in their village near Lucca, immediately qualified. Lucia's letters spoke of famine, bombed railways, and a German occupation that had only ended in September 1944. Marco, mobilized in 1941, had not seen his family in nearly 4 years, a period encompassing combat in North Africa, capture by British forces, and transfer to American custody in Oklahoma. His return was never in doubt. His family awaited him, unlike some younger, unmarried prisoners. Yet, as the weeks passed, Marco meticulously observed and catalogued American infrastructure, particularly the roads. Understanding these memories would be vital for comprehending Italy's future. Processing began in early June 1945. Marco's medical exam revealed a 23-pound weight gain, a mix of gratitude and guilt. Debriefings were brief. Italian POWs, now considered co-belligerents, were treated more as parolees than enemies. American officers expressed genuine concern for their return to a ravaged nation, offering pamphlets on the nascent Marshall Plan. On June 28, 1945, Marco boarded a troop train for Camp Shanks, New York, the primary embarkation point for repatriation. During the 4-day journey, he pressed his face to the window, captivated by American highways paralleling the railway. Even with the European War won and the Pacific conflict ongoing, road crews systematically resurfaced sections of Route 66, repaired bridges in Pennsylvania, and painted fresh center lines in New Jersey. This unwavering maintenance, executed with unhurried competence, mirrored what he'd witnessed in Oklahoma. There, Italian POWs toiled in cotton fields, while American civilian crews repaved nearby county roads, seemingly immune to the wartime exigencies that would have halted such work elsewhere. Camp Shanks processed 11,000 former POWs, mostly Italians, in July 1945. Marco waited 3 weeks for a berth on the USS General W.P. Richardson, a troopship converted for repatriation. He boarded on July 22, 1945, joining 4,800 other Italian ex-prisoners bound for Naples. The 13-day voyage passed without incident, U-boats no longer a threat. On deck, Marco discussed with fellow Tuscans the grim realities awaiting them. Letters described Florence's destroyed bridges, Pisa's obliterated rail yards, and Livorno reduced to rubble by German demolitions. One man learned his village had changed hands 4 times, leaving it stripped and damaged. Another's family survived on Allied rations. Marco's wife wrote that their village had escaped major combat but endured severe deprivation. 18 months of German occupation had emptied food stores, requisitioned vehicles, and conscripted able-bodied men into labour battalions. The roads, she'd once mentioned, were impassable, cratered by retreating Germans and never repaired. The USS General W.P. Richardson docked in Naples on August 4, 1945. Marco disembarked into a port operating at a fraction of its pre-war capacity. Sunken vessels and shrapnel-scarred warehouses. American military government officials directed prisoners to tents for processing, where Italian authorities issued temporary travel documents. Marco received a rail pass to Florence, though warned the journey could take days due to damaged tracks and limited rolling stock. A pre-war 6-hour trip became 41 hours in August 1945. The train departed Naples on August 5th, travelling slowly over fragile repaired tracks. From a freight car fitted with wooden benches, Marco observed comprehensive devastation. Every rail bridge showed evidence of demolition and hasty reconstruction, temporary wooden trestles replacing generations-old stone arches. Towns along the route were a catalogue of bombed buildings, empty windows and rubble-choked streets. An overnight stop in Cassino revealed a town utterly destroyed, the monastery above a mere shell. 13,000 Allied soldiers had died capturing this position. He contrasted this with Oklahoma's smooth, war-maintained highways, feeling the immense chasm between American power and Italian devastation. Reaching Florence on August 7, 1945, Marco found a station with a partially restored corrugated metal roof. He waited 4 hours for a bus to Lucca, a 40-mile journey that took 3 hours over cratered roads, mended with whatever materials were available. The bus driver navigated around wheel-swallowing potholes, slowed for temporary wooden bridges and detoured where roads had vanished. The smooth provincial roads of 1941 were gone, replaced by farm tracks and disaster routes. Arriving in Lucca at 7 p.m, he walked the final 7 kilometres to his village, no transport available. The 2-hour walk in fading light followed a road churned by military traffic, unrepaired, with collapsed drainage and eroded shoulders. He returned home after 4 years and 3 months to his wife and sons, now 8 and 6. They lived in 3 rooms of their 5-room house. German officers had occupied and damaged the others. Lucia had salvaged what she could. The boys barely remembered him. The reunion was emotional yet subdued, exhaustion and deprivation leaving little room for dramatics. That night, Marco listened as Lucia recounted the occupation. Confiscations, forced labour, Allied bombings, the terror of retreating Germans executing partisan suspects, the relief of American arrival in September 1944, and the grinding reality of survival amidst ruins. Within 2 weeks, Marco secured work at a Fiat contractors plant in Lucca, bombed in 1943 and idle since. His Army mechanical training and observations of American industrial methods in Oklahoma made him invaluable. The factory began producing truck components for Italy's reconstruction. Marco worked 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, earning wages that allowed his family to buy food from the black market. By late 1945, he was a shift supervisor, overseeing 20 men rebuilding production capacity. The work was consuming, but during his bicycle commute over barely passable roads, Marco's mind often drifted to infrastructure. He saw American military government engineers directing Italian crews in emergency bridge repairs, prioritizing routes for food distribution, but comprehensive road maintenance was years away. The stark contrast with America's war-maintained highways never left him. He began to understand Oklahoma's lesson. A nation so wealthy, secure, and industrially advanced could wage global war while maintaining peacetime civilian infrastructure standards. Italy had been a battleground, its roads necessarily destroyed, while American roads, thousands of miles from conflict, remained perfect. This disparity illuminated a dimension of power Marco had never fully grasped. By 1948, Marco managed the Fiat contractor facility, employing 80 workers producing components for the Fiat 500, which would motorize post-war Italy. He earned enough to fully repair his house and buy a used motorcycle, granting him mobility as Italy's transport network slowly rebuilt. Marshall Plan funds began flowing, financing road reconstruction across Tuscany. Italian crews, supervised by American engineers, commenced systematic highway restoration using American methods, proper grading, layered foundations, and drainage engineering. Marco often watched these crews, recognizing the methodical approach he'd seen in Oklahoma. He spoke with engineers, learning why American roads endured for decades, while Italian wartime repairs failed quickly. These lessons influenced his manufacturing approach. He insisted on proper maintenance, quality control, and building things to last, rejecting expedient solutions. His reputation grew. In 1952, Piaggio recruited him to modernize their Pontedera factory, producing Vespa scooters. He moved his family to Pisa for better schools. His daughter, born in 1953, entered an Italy transformed, roads restored, factories humming, consumer goods increasingly available. The economic miracle had begun. Marco instilled in his children, particularly his daughter Francesca, an almost obsessive appreciation for maintenance and quality. On weekends, he took them to construction sites, explaining modern road building, drainage importance, and the difference between temporary and permanent solutions. When Francesca asked why roads mattered so much, he spoke of America. Highways maintained through global war, unhurried road crews working while the nation fought on two fronts. The understanding that infrastructure maintenance reflected national strength and social commitment. Francesca absorbed these lessons. Excelling in math and physics, she entered the University of Pisa in 1971 to study civil engineering, one of 30 women in a class of 400. She graduated in 1976 and joined Autostrade per l'Italia, managing highway expansion projects. Marco, 61 and greying, attended her graduation, filled with quiet pride that his daughter was building the infrastructure Italy had lacked upon his return. Though he never explicitly stated his Oklahoma observations inspired her, she understood. The stories of war-maintained American roads and destroyed, then rebuilt, Italian roads, and the embedded lesson about power and priorities were a constant presence from her childhood. Marco retired from Piaggio in 1980, after 35 years in Italy's motor industry, having witnessed its transformation from post-war wreckage to European industrial power. He and Lucia returned to a village near their pre-war home outside Lucca, now prosperous and connected by modern highways, unrecognizable from 1945. Marco maintained a workshop, restoring vintage motorcycles, a hobby that kept him active into his 80s. He watched Italy's continued development with satisfaction, the expanded autostrada network, high-speed rail, sustained infrastructure investments. Yet, he never forgot the original contrast from 1943 to 1945. In his final years, he often recounted to his grandchildren his bafflement at America's ability to maintain peacetime road standards during global conflict. His grandson later recalled that Marco viewed those Oklahoma highways as the clearest symbol of the gap between American power and European weakness, a gap Italy had narrowed for 50 years but never fully closed. Marco understood America fought the war from unassailable security and abundance, while Italy was a battlefield. But seeing maintenance crews calmly resurfacing highways in Oklahoma, while American forces fought globally, crystallized for him the shocking reality of American strength, a strength so overwhelming that even its roads were exempt from wartime sacrifice. Marco Rossi died in November 1995, aged 80, having witnessed Italy's full reconstruction. His daughter, Francesca, in her eulogy, noted his frequent stories of American infrastructure during captivity, not combat. These seemingly trivial observations profoundly shaped his family's values of quality, maintenance, and long-term thinking. She spoke of a 1944 photograph he kept, Italian POWs in an Oklahoma cotton field, with a perfectly maintained highway in the background, traffic flowing, workers resurfacing. Marco believed that photo encapsulated why America won, a nation wealthy enough to maintain its roads while building the arsenal that defeated 3 empires. Francesca acknowledged her civil engineering career was directly inspired by her father's conviction that infrastructure maintenance was civilization's foundational commitment, learned by witnessing nations' differing capacities to maintain roads during war. The funeral drew over 200 people, including former Piaggio colleagues, 3 generations of family, and American tourists Marco had befriended, drawn to his stories of wartime Oklahoma and gratitude for humane treatment. The experiences of Italian POWs in America, exemplified by Marco Rossi, subtly but significantly shaped post-war Italian-American relations. Approximately 50,000 Italian POWs held in American camps between 1943 and 1945 returned to Italy, challenging their previous assumptions about America. Many, like Marco, expecting a crude nation, instead found industrial efficiency, material abundance, and civic order far surpassing Fascist Italy. Their testimony bolstered post-war Italy's pro-American stance, its embrace of Marshall Plan aid, and its alignment with Western institutions during the Cold War. The contrast between American war-maintained infrastructure and Italy's war-destroyed infrastructure became a recurring theme in Italian modernization debates. Advocates for highway construction and public works often cited the American example, proving infrastructure maintenance was economically rational, not a luxury. The autostrade system, expanded after 1950, reflected lessons learned from American highway models. Former POWs who observed American road construction became informal advisors, sharing technical knowledge. Memoirs from the 1950s and 60s, while varied, consistently highlighted American infrastructure as evidence of the vast wealth disparity enabling wartime maintenance in America while Italy's roads crumbled. Historical documentation of Italian POW experiences has grown since the 1990s. The Italian-American Studies Association's 1995 research initiative on Camp Alva and other camps revealed extensive records of systematic road maintenance near virtually every POW camp throughout the war. State highway departments maintained normal schedules, a fact consistently noted by Italian POWs in letters and diaries. A 2001 University of Oklahoma study found infrastructure maintenance among the top 3 most commonly mentioned observations by Italian POWs in Oklahoma, alongside food abundance and racial tolerance. Camp Alva's museum, established in 2003, preserves barracks and exhibits, including photos of POWs in cotton fields with perfectly maintained Route 64 in the background. Oral histories from 12 Camp Alva veterans consistently mention American road maintenance as memorable, expressing bafflement at its continuation during global war. These accounts confirm infrastructure maintenance was a central component of how Italian POWs understood American power and prosperity. The broader significance of Italian POW observations extends to how societies signal priorities during crises. America's decision to maintain civilian infrastructure during World War II was a strategic calculation, supporting war production, civilian morale, and preventing economic disruption. To Italian prisoners accustomed to total war, this maintenance appeared extravagant, a display of vast surplus wealth. Modern military historians increasingly recognize that wartime infrastructure maintenance capacity reveals more about relative national strength than combat statistics alone. Nations maintaining peacetime standards for civilian services while fighting wars demonstrate a resource depth that significantly predicts victory. Italian POW testimony provides contemporaneous evidence of this principle. They immediately understood a nation maintaining roads during global war possessed overwhelming advantages. Educational programs at US Army logistics schools now include World War II infrastructure maintenance as an example of how industrial capacity and geographic security create strategic advantages, often citing Italian POW observations as primary evidence of how adversaries perceived American material superiority. The lesson remains relevant. Infrastructure maintenance during crisis is not waste, but a demonstration of the resource depth that determines long-term competitive outcomes between nations.